Oh, I'm sorry. I moved you and then I skipped you. So I'd like to welcome Matthew Lane from the Lane Group, who is the contract engineer for the town of Abingdon. We would like to have him discuss the problems that have been brought to us about flooding several times.
Thank you very much. A good engineer never goes anywhere without a handout.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
No, I can't do that. You don't. We'll share.
We have an extra one, can't
Sure.
Okay, thank you for having me tonight. We have looked at the drainage situation that we've got going on Hagee Street and Preston Street, and if you'll go to the first map, I guess we'll talk a little bit about that. Now, there's no doubt, as Mr. Copenhaver has said, that the properties in question do experience a lot of flooding. When it rains hard and long, those properties are going to have some issues with that. And if you'll see right beside Eads Auto Repair on the map, that's where the two residences are located. And they are, again, at the bottom end of that drainage basin that's highlighted in green. And unfortunately, the yards are flat. So when the water does make it there, it stays there. So there are some issues there for sure. Now, one of the proposed solutions was to build a asphalt berm across Hagee Street and divert the water that runs down Columbia Road on past Hagee Street and take it down Preston Street to the drainage that Mr. Copenhaver was talking about. And obviously we could do that, but that is not good practice at all. You never want to take water from one drainage basin and put it into another drainage basin. That's just not something that you want to do, especially if you've already got problems in the drainage basin that you're diverting the water to. And we know that we've got flooding issues on Preston because, well, we've all seen pictures, so we know we've got some issue there. But even if we wanted to do that, and we don't, I do not believe that would fix the problem. Because if you look at the map, you can kind of tell really the only water that's running down Hagee Street that would be diverted by an asphalt curb is what runs off of Colonial Road. The rest of that area that's highlighted in green, and that doesn't show up really well, but the rest of that area also drains to the two subject properties, okay? And that's quite a significant area, especially when we have a heavy rain. There's no ditch or anything along Hagee Street, so all the water just runs right across and eventually ends up near our subject property there. So what do we do, or what can be done? What can the property owners do to alleviate some of this issue? As it turns out, there is a grass swale on the north side of Eads Auto Repair, and that grass swale, I know, had to be put there for this very purpose, to control the runoff, because they are at the bottom of the drainage basin. So all this water runs through their property, and then of course it eventually discharges into a culvert that carries the water on down to Wolf Creek. So if you flip over the next page, and if all this is clear as mud, I'll stop and answer any questions that you have. There's a couple of things that I think would help the situation. Now, nothing probably is going to fix it completely, but I do think there's a couple of things that we can do that would really help the situation out there. First off, I noticed that several of the roof gutters were discharging right beside the foundation of the house. Now, there was a dog that looked a lot like Cujo that was sitting between the two houses when I was out there. So I didn't walk all the way around the house, but I did see It did, it met its intended purpose. I did not trespass, so. But a lot of these roof gutters are discharging pretty close to the foundation of the house, or were when I was out there looking around. When it rains, one of the biggest contributors to runoff is the roof, because nothing's absorbed, it all goes straight off. And worse yet, it all gets diverted into a gutter and then straight down that gutter spout. So there could be a lot of water that comes off of a roof. So anytime anybody has any kind of drainage problem, one of the first things we want to look at is those gutter drains and spouts. And in this case, I do believe, and again, I think they'd have some issue with this because the way the property is, you don't have a lot of property on either side. But I do believe we could capture some of that water, or the homeowners could capture some of that water from the roof gutters and divert it at least away from the foundation of their homes. So that would be recommendation number one. Recommendation number two would be an asphalt curb, just very similar to what was proposed, what had been proposed for Hagee Street. Only this would start at Country Boy Seed, go adjacent to Hagee Street in front of the two houses, and then end on each auto repair property. Now, what this does, if you're out there and after a rain, you can see all the water is concentrated down to Hagee Street. Okay, there are no ditches or no other way for the water to go. So when the water gets on Hagee Street, it runs down Hagee Street, and a lot of it probably doesn't make it over onto those residential yards. So one way that we could eliminate that issue would be to build that asphalt curb down alongside Hagee Street. And I did send my guys out there. We shot grade just to make sure that would work. Now, we'd need to, or the homeowners would need to talk to each auto repair and make sure that everybody was on the same page, Country Boy Seed, because we don't have a heck of a lot of right-of-way out there. So some of this would be done off of the town right-of-way. But I do believe if we did those two things, and maybe even, you can see Country Boy Seed has a heck of a roof on their property there too, that's probably letting a lot of water come onto the residential homes. They might be able to talk to Country Boy Seed about redirecting some of that water as well. But nevertheless, I believe if those two recommendations are implemented, the situation would be probably not remedied, but at least improved quite a bit. And that concludes my report.
Do you have, what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me. I'm no engineer, but it makes a lot of sense. If you had to guess, if you would, how percentage-wise, how much of the issue you think's coming from the roofs on the house? Are we talking like a quarter, half of all their runoff? Is it hard to estimate?
Well, it would be, but if I throw a number out there, I'm going to say 50 to 60%. Because the water that's coming off of the roof is going right there.
Straight into the yard. I got you.
So by the time the runoff water gets down Hagee Street to the subject property, the yards are already saturated anyway.
Okay.
So and again, that's just a swag.
Oh, sure.
But it is a significant contributor.
Gotcha.
I believe.
And you do hydrology as a good part of your engineering practice?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've got a lot of experience with doing that kind of work, and also being a consultant engineer to towns and municipalities throughout the area. And all towns in Southwest Virginia have issues with drainage.
Sure.
Drainage.
Now, if we went with that asphalt curb, if you will, is that something you would suggest the town staff could perhaps do, or is that something we need to farm out to a specialty group?
So we can do the asphalt part, but it's a matter of whether or not we have the right of way or not. Because some of these things, I think they mentioned doing them actually on the property itself, and that's going to be incumbent upon the property owner. Now, I believe the property owner is actually the same person, and they don't live in town, so I don't know whether they're rentals or what the situation is. But yeah, it would be incumbent upon the people that have the property. But if we wanted the one off of Hagee, right where the Hagee and Preston, there's a little black, like a 3 or 4 inch concrete or asphalt strip there that helps keep water off of that swale, but pushes it further down. And so if you were talking about running those the whole way down, is that what you're kind of mentioning?
No, just in front of the homes, from the
Okay.
entrance to Country Boy Seat to the entrance of
Yeah.
Ed's Auto would be the only place that we'd put that.
And that would just kind of divert the water onto Hagee Street so it could continue running on down Hagee Street till it hits the culvert.
Correct.
Okay, keep it out of their yards.
Yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming that that's a pretty cost-effective thing that wouldn't really cause a lot of property damage to people's yards.
No.
Wouldn't,
No.
I mean, I don't mean to say property damage, but it wouldn't alter their yards to a large degree.
No, the asphalt curb, if we did, whoever done it would put it right on top of the street, where
Okay.
the street is now.
Okay.
Similar to what's down Palm Alley?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, our folks did that. so.
And the runoff is strictly up to the property owners, right?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
to take care of their,
And I guess just to clarify that, Matthew, the runoff, other than what you've said is on the roof, is coming from other private property. Hagee Street's been there for 100 years,
Yes.
longer. That's not the urban pathway that caused it. It's coming down off the hill from Colonial Road, from private property, and reaching Hagee Street, but Hagee Street isn't causing the flooding.
No, no, sir. No, Hagee Street's kind of a conduit that carries the water. If you look at the first map again, you see the vast majority of the drainage area is just that, private property.
And all your arrows on there are elevation, right? It's pointing downhill.
Showing where the drainage is.
Makes sense.
So it all just kind of converges in front of those two residences.
Right.
Okay.
It eventually, whether it ponds in our residents' yards or not, it eventually makes it to that grass swale right on the north side of Ed's Auto Repair.
Okay.
And really that acts as a big detention pond
Mhm.
because the downstream drainage is not adequate to carry the amount of water that comes from there. I wish I had brought, but the Preston Street area is a huge drainage area. It goes all the way up to Russell Road. So it's a big drainage area that contributes drainage to that Preston Street area. And that's why we don't want to put any more water on it.
Okay. Okay. Okay, you've given us a lot of information to think about, and we wanted to make sure we were talking about the concerns, and we appreciate your time.
You're very welcome.
Does anybody have any more questions?
well, I'd like to make a comment only because I received probably one of the first calls. Is the property owners said this wasn't a problem until the town did something. You know, they seem to think the town caused it. So what you're saying is the town did not have anything to do with this. It's just, okay.
I have seen no indication of anything that the town has done to either cause or worsen this drainage situation.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Don.
Appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay. Moving on to public comments. For public comments, I'd like to remind you that you need to state your name and address, and that if you could please limit your remarks to 3 minutes, that would be wonderful. And we have one person signed up. We have Mr. Eddie Copenhaver.
Eddie Copenhaver, 205 Preston Street, Abingdon, Virginia. Thank you, Mayor Pillion, council members. I'm here tonight to speak about a problem we have with flooding down on Preston Street and Hagee Street. Now, I live on a farm and we have a lot of water. When it rains on my farm, an inch, it's 2.25 million gallons of water. That's 4 Olympic swimming pools full. So I kind of understand about how water works. When I I heard my mom a lot of times talk about the flooding that was going on Hagee Street, and to be honest, I didn't pay much attention to her because I didn't see it was being a problem. But then when I moved down here, I was standing at the kitchen window one morning during the rain, And I was like, good God, look at that water running down the creek street. And it was kind of cold, so once it warmed up, I started going out and I started seeing where the water was going. And I grew up there. That was where I was born. They moved there when I was 6 months old. So I really do remember how it was. And in front of the house, there is a gutter. And this gutter goes down and it goes into it was supposed to go into a 16-inch culvert. And the town at some point put this culvert in because when I was growing up, this was a ditch. So somebody decided to put a culvert in. Now, all the water runs down and it goes in this creek. The question is, how does it get to this creek? All right, you saw the picture of the gutter earlier. This is a gutter with no water in it. This is running down the street in the same rainstorm. I mean, this picture was taken with minutes of each other. Nothing goes down the gutter. It's a lot of water. I don't know if you can see this picture, but it's a lot of water. My neighbors try to have a nice house. I mean, you can kind of see that they decorate their yard, and you can also see the amount of water that they deal with. So if you go down the street a little bit, you come to the old Hiltz garage. And it used to be a storage yard for wrecked trucks. It all goes through there. And I can't believe it, that's not contaminating the water. I've got about 30 seconds. I'm going to leave you with these pictures. And we will talk about it, the rest of it, next time. Y'all have a super good night. Can I present these?
Yes, sure, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie.
One point that did come up was the issue on Preston Street, and I did have an engineering study done on that, and I do have the hydrology reports on that. So we are aware of it. We've met with him, Mr. Copenhager, and like I said, we had engineers. What I didn't want to do was just, well, let's try this. That doesn't work. Let's try this. Because when you move water, it always goes somewhere else. And so we wanted to make sure we weren't adversely impacting other people. And so we did do the study, and the study didn't show that some of the suggested fixes weren't actual fixes. And so that's why when we do these things, we like to have the engineers involved. And so I do have that report. I can share that with anybody who's interested in seeing that.
Next, we have public comments, and we do have someone signed up for public comment. Reminder to state your name and your address, and that you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mayor Paley, board members and staff. When I came last time, we were talking about the flooding down on Preston and Hagee Street. And at the time, and still am, to me, I'm probably more concerned about the people that live there. But really what you sort of look at is where the Hagee's garage used to be, and it's an auto repair shop now. And I'll leave you some more pictures, but this shows the water standing in front of the shop, and this shows behind it where it's a big puddle. Now, on this water, now I don't know when exactly Hiltz was in, but here's 1995. You can see the garage, and you can see that broken vehicles or wrecked vehicles are behind it. 2006, you see more wrecked vehicles. 2015, still more vehicles, and actually something's running out of the garage. Now, when we get to talking about what it might be, okay, when you look at what comes out of a car, you've got gas, oil, brake fluid, transmission fluid, differential fluid, battery fluid, there's all kinds of stuff. And then when you get into we're going to electric cars. When you get to electric cars, you come into phosphorus, boron, lithium, manganese, aluminum, copper, polypropylene, and polyvinyl fluorides. So these are things that probably shouldn't be in the environment. Now, all this stuff flows down and it goes into the little ditch that runs down through there. And that ditch goes into Wolf Creek. And if you want to see how it goes, here it goes, and it comes right in there behind where Blights Mill used to be. I think that y'all like Wolf Creek because you put it on your website. Telling about the great things that Wolf Creek does, about the fish and all. But a quarter of a mile from where this is, you've got this creek that runs in that has no idea what kind of contaminants are in the water. And I'd just like to point that out, and maybe we'll talk a little bit later about some solutions to it. Thank you all so much, and you all have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we are open for public comments, and we have one person signed up for public comment. If you will please come forward, state your address, and reminder that you're limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening, council members. Condolences on the list if you're a member of the fire family. I grew up in a fire family, and I can't imagine what this is. But I'm here tonight to speak about Hagee Street. Last time we talked about some solutions. I brought this up to Mr. Cochran back last year when y'all was at the joint meeting of the supervisors. And I've worked with him this summer, and we really hadn't gotten anywhere. I've suggested the 25-foot 2-inch strip across Preston Street. Now this is about 2 inches. Now, that's about 2 inches right there. Okay? Their plan is to put a 4-inch, that big, strip around all the houses. I talked to Lisa Andis today. She owns those 2 houses. She liked the Preston Street idea better. Got a couple of pictures you can have when it's over. But, I don't understand why the water has to go down Hagee Street. I mean, it just seems like that there's some force from above that's making the water. Says it can't go anywhere else. It has to go down Hagee Street, where it floods the houses, the car lot, the mill. While there's a 4-inch gutter in front of my house, that really little water comes in. And I have heard so many excuses of why it can't work. One of them was that this culvert was crushed. So here was the culvert before it was crushed. I brought a floor jack from the farm and I fixed it. It took all of 5 minutes. I mean, that was, to say we can't do this because it's going to take 5 minutes work. I don't understand. Like I said, it seems like there's somebody from above that just doesn't want this to happen. The tunnel is not stopped up. It's partially stopped up, but it's not completely stopped up, and water does run through it. I believe if you'd run some more water through it, like what I'm proposing, that it would unstop itself. The erosion would just clean it out. It goes down into a concrete distribution box that the town put in. And I don't understand why you don't want to use it or why you replaced this distribution box if you wasn't going to use it. I mean, I don't understand the way that Mr. Cochran wants to do is going to take 175 inches of feet of 4-inch concrete. My way uses 25 feet of 2-inch concrete. My way makes much more sense. It's much cheaper. It does a much better job. And I'm out of time. Y'all have a wonderful night.
Thank you. And now I would like to open the floor for public comments. We have 2 people signed up for public comments. Please remember that you are limited to 3 minutes per person. And please state your name and address. And the first person we have is Mr. Eddie Copenhaver.
Mayor, council members. I got a letter from Mr. Cochran this week, maybe last week, telling me that they were gonna tear out the concrete gutter beside my house. And it's really kind of sad because it goes around Alana's hair place. And, you know, when it was put in, it really helped stabilize that bank. Now, years ago, there was an old house there, then it was HTC Technical, then it was United Way. And it's really helped a whole lot to stabilize that bank. And they've worked really, they've made it look really good, cleaning it up and putting flowers in there and putting bushes in there. And I really hate to see it taken out. But, you know, it's your wall, so whatever. In the same letter, he mentioned that if you run the water down Preston Street, that it would cause additional flooding. Now, there's a 6 by 10 or 6 by 12 gutter that runs along the street, and it runs into a 16-inch underground drain. That's a great big drain, will take a whole lot of water. And I just don't see how it's going to flood, and you really need to ask that question of how is the water going to flood and what kind of situation would it take to cause that to flood. I mean, it was made to handle this. It really was. Years ago it was made to handle this, and for some reason they've decided it won't work. They mentioned the flooding at 223 Preston Street. That's the dog grooming place. That flooding is caused by the urban pathway. I don't know whether the urban pathway was engineered or whether they just put some asphalt down. I don't know. But the way the urban pathway is sloped, it runs the water into her business. It has nothing to do with the water on my corner at all. And I just don't really see how the water would get to her place from my corner. Sort of believe that water would go into my house before it would go in her house. But anyway, just try to pay attention to that, ask some questions, and I'm gonna leave y'all with 30 extra seconds tonight. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now we have.
Good evening, council members. Matthew Lane came and spoke last time. Matthew is a really good engineer, but he's into big projects like huge buildings and roadways and stuff like that. And the question came up, would this do any damage to the properties? And he's talked about putting a 4-inch berm around them. This is 4 inches. Now down below me, there was a gentleman named George Rush. And y'all probably don't remember Mr. Rush, but he had a shoe shop on Wall Street. But he was in a wheelchair. And he lived in the first house we're talking about. He was an independent man. He had a farm. He went to work every day. He drove himself around. But he was in a wheelchair. If this berm had been around entirely his house, he couldn't have got in and out. Because the berm has to be a solid level. If there's any dip in the berm, we like roll a wheelchair, put a sidewalk through, then the water's just going to run in there. So really, that's a bit much to ask to go around your house. If you think about stepping over this or driving over this every time you go to your house, it probably wouldn't be the best idea. One of the things that came up with the flooding issue on Preston Street, the dog grooming lady below me, she has a flooding problem. It's not part of this at all. I don't know whether the urban pathway was engineered or somebody just said run some asphalt out through here, but it's sloped wrong. And the slope of the urban pathway is what runs water into her house. It has nothing to do with this. All this water is coming from Colonial Road. And there was a move about moving from one drainage basin to another. We're only moving water a couple of 100 feet. So I just don't see the problem, and really to make people step over that every time they come in and out of the house. We're gonna put up 240 feet of 4-inch asphalt around these houses, and I'm only asking for 24 foot of 2-inch. So mine is like 20 times cheaper. And I don't really know where to go from there, but, I'm not gonna give up on trying to get things fixed. I'm gonna keep coming back and asking more and more and more, so thank y'all.
Thank you.
We are now open for public comments. We have one person signed up for public comment tonight. Mr. Copenhaver, if you'd like to come forward and address us, we'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Mayor Pillion, council members, staff. Just wanted to remind y'all that we still do have a problem down on Hagee Street. After y'all's last meeting, the next day was pretty rainy. And those people got a pretty good dose of water. They really did. And it was cold and it was rainy. And they really shouldn't have to do that. I mean, they're town citizens just like anybody else. I mean, they may not live in the nicest section of town, but they're town residents, and they deserve a little bit of help. And what I'm asking for, what they're asking for, is not much. Just stop the creek. It's not a creek that's there all the time. It's not a creek that was there forever. It's just a creek that comes when it rains. And it's because of just the edge of Colonial Road and Preston Street. There's a lot of asphalt there, and you could just run it right across it down into the gutter on Preston Street, where at some point somebody thought it was supposed to go. That's the reason the gutter's there. And it just doesn't go that way. I don't understand why. Don't understand why it's so hard to get anybody to see that. I mean, it amazes me that it can't get fixed if it's a simple problem. And it's, we're talking about putting the 4-inch berm around the houses. Well, that's just a terrible thing to ask people to step over, to have to walk to get into their house. I mean, if you had to step over a 4-inch obstruction every time you went into your house, you would eventually get tired of it. If you ever hurt, that would, you could get into your house. And just don't want you to forget about it. If you look in California right now, they're having some kind of a atmospheric river coming across, and they're getting flooded. And if we have that here, it's going to flood these houses. It's going to flood them bad. It's going to flood the dog grooming place. And if y'all would just kind of look at Preston Street, and I know you want to do something different, but if y'all just keep Preston Street in mind, don't forget us. We really need help. Thank you.
Thank you.